This is Elana Kilkenny, and this is your intuitive living tip of the day. Sometimes we find ourselves in kind of a rut or feeling stuck, just feeling a sense of lack of inertia and moving forward. Sometimes that's a symptom of something much deeper. Sometimes we get into periods where there's obviously really big transitions going on in our lives, or something that we're mourning, or some great loss in our lives. I'm not so much speaking about that today, because that has often a lot of deeper diving that you need to do in terms of trying to move through it and not just out of it. What I'm talking more about is just, again, this feeling of like, I just feel stuck. I feel kind of not very inspired. I don't feel like things are kind of moving forward. So often when things like that happen, I say, take a look and ask yourself two really clarifying questions. The first question is, what am I avoiding? What am I resisting is another way of putting it. And the second question is, what am I desiring to feel and or to bring in, depending on what the situation is and what feels right for you. So again, it's kind of like point counterpoint, right? Because often what we're resisting, often what we're avoiding, is actually getting in the way of either movement or clarity or inspiration or new opportunities, or again, whatever that kind of sense of movement is that we're looking for in our lives. And sometimes it's also just about clarifying what we desire and what we want and putting some attention, and action towards it. So let's unpack this a bit. In terms of what we might be avoiding, a classic example of that is, when I work with clients in intuitive counseling, often one of the first kind of layers that we just look at is, are there bills that need to be paid? Are there emails that you're avoiding? Is there phone calls that, you're resistant to or scared of? Or again, just avoiding. And sometimes, with those kind of things, sometimes there really is a lot of resistance to it. So I often say, even with that, maybe take those items, like take the bills, take your computer to email or just your phone, and take it out of your home and or your office and go to a space that's just more neutral. That you're not surrounded by all your other distractions in your life, and you're not going to overthink things and kind of even beat yourself up or get into worry. I know that sometimes I live in New York City. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm just going to go to the nearest coffee shop or Starbucks, or just even I sometimes take it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art if I want to be inspired, just to kind of switch up that kind of routine way of being stuck about these items and to start moving through it. And often what I find with people is that sometimes it's the things that don't even feel related to the things you want to move forward with. Like, for instance, you want to move forward with something vocationally, you want to move forward with something just emotionally or just feeling better, or even something with your children. What exactly did not, the bills or the phone call or the email, have to do with that? Sometimes it's direct relationship, and sometimes, again, it's just energy is energy is energy. And where we're stuck, and stuckness propagates more stuckness, and can weigh on our minds and take up a lot of space within us. So on the flip side of that, what I will say is putting energy into what you do desire. So often, for so many, we're feeling kind of stuck or a sense of malaise because we were kind of stuck in our routine. We were feeling very much like life has become a routine, whether you're working a lot, whether you're a parent, whether it's all a combination of the two. I definitely can relate to both sides of that. I'm a parent of two young children, and I own my own business. So even within that, no matter how much I love both parts of my life that way and the other parts of my life, sometimes by the nature of owning your own business and the nature of having children, will mean that there's a certain amount of routine that you have to do, and some of which you might be happy with and some of which you might not, and some of which just might overall just start making you feel again like life is just kind of like you're phoning it in, like there's not much in it that is inspiring you. So for things like that, sometimes I just say, again, keeping it simple. Sometimes it's those little millimeter changes, those like 2 millimeter changes that you make that can actually shift things really kind of fast and give you some momentum. It might not like take care of the whole feeling, but it can start feeding you in a different way. So for instance, for my clients in New York City, or who live somewhere that this makes sense to do it in, I often just say, take a day where Maybe it's, a personal day or whatever it is. If you are working, maybe it's a weekend day where you've gotten more things online, so you've taken care of your errands beforehand, so it's not all stuck on the weekend, but where you actually just spend the day kind of listening to where the wind wants to take you, if you will. So as an example, what that looks like for me is sometimes it just means, again, just getting on a subway in the morning or whatever part of my day I made time to do this, and just seeing where I feel like I want to get off. Sometimes that's, let's say I'm going downtown, so I'll go on the subway and I'll just get the sense of where to go out. Usually it's areas, I have a sense of, sometimes it's not. And I just kind of see where I'm drawn to go, whether it's a cafe just to sit and people watch or to write, whether it's looking at some of my favorite things, like part of my work is doing sacred space design, which is, like intuitive design with soul. But one of my great joys, having nothing even to do so much with work, is just even looking at different design stores and going to different museums and seeing different arts or different galleries. So I'll just take myself to those experiences and do what Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way as an artist date with yourself, which again doesn't necessarily mean that it's artistic necessarily. It just means you're kind of listening to your spirit and you're taking yourself on a date. And often what happens in those days, interestingly enough, is synchronicities come in, and things that seem like coincidences but really aren't. And the more I find that people listen, and especially this is so true for me, the more I listen to those little whispers, like go here, pivot there, linger here a little bit longer. Oh, speak to that person that seems interesting next to you, and I don't know why, but somehow speak to that person or mention that or compliment that person. Those little whispers, sometimes they don't seem very meaningful, but sometimes they are. And even if they're not hugely impactful, there's something about just listening to yourself in that way and taking some time to to clear your head enough, to be present enough to listen to kind of what your own sense is telling you to do, can be very rejuvenating. It can really connect you deeper to yourself, because often when we're kind of feeling stuck, often, corollary with that is kind of feeling a sense of disconnection as well. So again, it doesn't have to be literally taking yourself to different locations. The idea behind it, if you will, again, is where can you disrupt and shift where you are in routine, and how can you shift your routine in a way just enough even that you're feeling a little disoriented in your routine, because with disorientation often comes change. I'm going to repeat that. With disorientation comes change. So sometimes when we start doing things a little differently, like even let's say in our lives, whether it's going a different route to work, whether it's saying, oh, I usually just kind of come straight home or straight to the gym or whatever that usually is for you. What if you disrupt that, maybe even one day a week, and shift something and just leave some room for some spontaneity in that, or for even planning something a little different to do that you've been kind of missing or desiring, or just have this kind of desire for that you're not even sure why. If you add a little bit of that kind of ingredient, I call it, that's just a little bit of that special sauce, and it actually can be a magnified effect for you, because it also switches something up in your brain. It's like it switches you out of this feeling of being in a consistent kind of Groundhog Day, because you're doing something different. And often things build on that. I often find that if I'm going through a period of feeling kind of stuck and I start just taking some action, it's so interesting how the universe will also respond. There's a part of it where it's kind of practical magic, if you will. You've taken a practical response, you've created some movement, something often will come back in. So, sometimes I'll be avoiding that email, or I'll be, overthinking something, and I'll finally do it. I'll finally send it out. And isn't it interesting that all of a sudden, I'll get another phone call about something completely unrelated, but something that's about kind of again, forward movement of what I've been wanting, or even sometimes it's even tangentially or spot on related to what I've released just now, or the fear that was being built up of something, and something comes back from the universe kind of as, a check mark to say, going in the right direction. And there's so many times something like that happens. So again, it's asking yourself, what am I avoiding? What am I in resistance to? Attending to that. And it doesn't mean you take care of everything. Like, that list can even be its own burdensome kind of albatross or distraction, right? Like, start with something. Because again, those 2 millimeter changes can really just, all you need sometimes with inertia is just starting to move a little bit more, a little bit faster, a little bit over where you were, and then build on that. So the other tip is that as you start feeling some movement, build on it. If you're feeling more energy and feeling more confident from some of the things that you were distracted with and you have time, do a few more of those things, because as you're feeling better about it and somehow you get the response in your own being, like, oh wait, this wasn't so bad. That's usually what it is. Or, God, that really was horrible. That really wasn't a comfortable situation or experience that I just had, but I feel so much better that it's now not weighing on me and that I handled it, and that I wasn't just avoiding it. That builds a different muscle and a different confidence in ourselves, about ourselves. Because when we're in avoidance about things, it also often affects our self-confidence about things, which also is an energy that can create stuckness and create kind of a blockage for other things that want to come in or other things that we want to come through us. Another kind of tip, if you will, around being stuck is kind of an interesting one. It has to do with like looking at your home and adding some shift in your home, because sometimes those visual shifts and inspiration can really be a great signal to you that can have other reverberations in your life. So along with intuitive counseling, I also have been doing sacred space design with clients for many years, and in that it's kind of design with soul. And it's the idea that our homes, as we shift our homes, our life also changes. So a quick way to kind of break out or start moving forward from being stuck is you can create a little altar in your home. You can just take a corner, you can take a shelf, a little kind of piece of space, real estate in your home. And you can make an altar. And again, when I say altar, I don't necessarily mean it has anything to do with anything religious. It's basically a space kind of meaning and intention, kind of like a vision board in 3D, if you will. So with that, you can, put different items down that are representative of what you might want to bring in. And sometimes you have a lot of clarity about what that is, and sometimes it's just like more of a feeling or a word. It could just, again, be a little amorphous, but you can find even things in your own home or let things find you that inspire that or feel connected to what you're desiring about moving forward. And I also say with people on an altar, it's really powerful to give a little thought and, meditate a bit on what is the obstacle to that? What is, again, looking back at those two questions, what am I resisting and avoiding, and what am I desiring? So if you put both of those kind of elements on an altar, it becomes very alive and very powerful, because something about even having to go through the process of like finding or thinking about or letting come to you, what is that item that kind of represents where I'm stuck, that often will give you information about not only where you're stuck, because maybe you really weren't sure, but it will give you also information about maybe a deeper sense of the desire that you're wanting and how those are connected, and maybe some other things that maybe you need to do in kind of real life, if you will. Or sometimes, again, practical magic comes into play. You put these things in and they kind of have their own alchemy, and there's something about having it in a space where you can see it, and maybe you do some ritual around it or some meditating on it. Well, those reverberations do go out into the universe, and sometimes opportunities come to resolve what that resistance is. Sometimes they're pleasant and sometimes they're not. I'm just going to let you know. So sometimes the person you've been avoiding all of a sudden contacts you. Sometimes the situation that you've been putting off either blows up or comes back around in a way that maybe you have less perceived control over, but that presents you with an opportunity to not just push it away and kind of avoid it. And other times just serendipity comes, sometimes the opportunity comes again in the very positive, just kind of clear as a bell way of, oh, what I was desiring and what I've kind of been putting on this altar, somehow opportunities or situations or experiences can be attracted to you from that. And or you will go out into the world, with more that focus, so that you can be more aware and making choices that kind of are aligned with how you want to move and how you like to move or how you don't like to move. So again, often when we're feeling stuck, it's about looking at, where are things got into routine? How can we see things differently? How can we look at things differently? Um, Another big piece of that is also, you know, just spending some time in kind of like in what you desire, and speaking that, sometimes, I'll tell people, take your voice memo on your phone. Most of us have like a voice memo on your phone, and maybe take yourself for a walk and just kind of speak into it, like speak to the stuckness and ask it questions. Why am I feeling so stuck? What do you need from me to help move forward? And it's interesting, there's something about walking and talking, just for yourself, that can come up with some really interesting answers. And again, sometimes it can seem so related, and other times you're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize I was feeling so stuck because maybe this was an anniversary of a loss or some other thing that happened in my life, or maybe it was a harbinger of something that was coming, and all of a sudden you kind of see the connection. There's been times in a lot of my clients' lives, and definitely in my life, that before some kind of big shift or a loss, we've had some presentiment of it. Even if we didn't know exactly what it was, there was a sense of it, and so things kind of slowed down to make us aware of it and make us be able to go. So take a look at what could be those areas that you're in resistance to, as well as those areas as to what you want to put energy in, and then do it. A big thing about where you're stuck has a lot to do with naming it and deciding to kind of just do it. It's almost where sometimes it becomes a bit of a Nike commercial where, just thinking about it and thinking about it, often that mental energy can just create more stuckness. And sometimes just making those 2 millimeter movements can actually make a world of difference. So take a chance and ask yourself those 2 questions. See what you come up with. Maybe take yourself for a walk. Maybe take yourself out of the routine. Attend to those things that are kind of cluttered or stuck, whether it's in your life or your inbox or in your home. See what kind of traction that creates, and attraction that creates, and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please share with me, maybe where you're stuck, or what are some of your tips to kind of moving forward when you get stuck, what has helped you. And if you decide to take any of these tips that we're talking about today, talk about, maybe give me some feedback about what was working for you and what wasn't working for you. I'd love to hear from you.